You are listening to episode number 71 of the Animals at Home podcast. Welcome back to the show. My name is DILLON Perrett. Thank you very much for tuning in today. This is the podcast that inspires others to push the limits of their reptile care by promoting high-level, creative husbandry, individualized for each animal. And as always, for more information on the network, make sure you head to animalsathomenetwork.com, and there you will find links to all the other shows that are produced on this network. And if you are looking for an Animals at Home t-shirt, head to animalsathome.ca/shop, and there you can find t-shirts or sweaters, and $5 does automatically get donated to the Amazon Rainforest Conservancy. Thank you very much to CustomReptileHabitats.com for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. If you are looking for more information on custom reptile habitats, make sure you head to the link in the show notes or the YouTube description box. That is an affiliate link, so if you do purchase something, a small commission does come back to me at no extra cost to you. So today I'm speaking with Sam Perrett, and if you remember all the way back to episode number 29 back in July of 2019, Sam was my guest then. We talked all about lighting and heating and fulfilling the electromagnetic spectrum, and in that episode he actually talked about a very, I would say, lofty, creative, and exciting idea that he had as a light control system. I'm not going to say too much right now because we'll talk about it a lot in the podcast, and I'm going to actually play that clip before we jump into to refresh your memory if you haven't listened to that episode. So this episode is really dedicated to this incredibly brilliant lighting system that Sam has created, and of course we also talk about his collection and a few other things as well. So before we jump into the episode, I want to say if you're listening to this on the podcast, about 70% of that will be totally fine, but there's probably about a 10 or 15 minute period of the podcast where Sam is actually showing us stuff on screen. You will be able to follow along just by the audio, but you'll probably want to come back to the YouTube video so you can actually see the device and see Sam working with his hands and see him using his actual computer that he's made. So if you are listening on the apps, make sure you come back later and listen on YouTube as well so you don't miss out on that visual aspect of this episode. So I know I've already said this, but again, if you want more information on this episode, make sure you head to animalsathomenetwork.com, and there you'll find the link to this episode under the Animals at Home banner. I have a few graphs and a few different pictures and things that go along with this episode, so if you are looking for more of a visual on what we're talking about, especially when we get into some of the decor and fake rock work that Sam does, definitely head there so you can see pictures. Okay, I'm going to let us go into a clip from episode number 29 where Sam is just telling us about this spark of an idea he had, and then we're going to carry on into the episode and he's going to tell us all about this unbelievable device.
But I think the biggest thing that's not really understood is that everyone puts them into one plug and goes, right, they come on at 8, they go off at 10.
Yeah.
It's like somebody flipping a switch outside and all of a sudden the sun pops up, the clouds clear away, the moon goes away, and it suddenly goes from pitch black to full brightness. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're still providing the full spectrum and you've got your visible light and your UV and stuff, then, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But one thing I've really been looking into recently is how can we stagger that? And so the first step of that is literally just having multiple timers for the different elements and bringing them on segregated. So it's still, in essence, flipping a switch because obviously the halogens just come on, the UV just comes on. But the thing I'm working on at the moment, this is what I'm really excited about. I haven't actually told anybody about it yet either. So it's effectively a Raspberry Pi control system. It basically controls everything from a single point. And you can get like LED tape, like on a reel.
Yep.
Well, I found some really cool, powerful stuff. Also comes with a hefty price tag, but I'm going to try it anyway. And you can get like the aluminium profiles that in the building trade and stuff, they'd lay them in the floor and stuff. And I found a triple width profile. So they do this tape in various different colors. So they do it so I've picked out a 2,700, a 4,500 and a 6,500. And I'm going to put one of each tape in this tube, but they're all independently attached to the Raspberry Pi. So I can control now, once I work out how to actually do it, I haven't quite got that far yet, I can set it, because your Raspberry Pi can be internet controlled, I can give it a latitude and longitude. It will automatically calculate the sunrise and the sunset times of that particular location.
Oh my gosh.
That's the easy bit, because there's people who've written code out there for that already. That's really easy. The hard bit then is creating a profile. So basically, for example, 8 o'clock in the morning, the 2,700s will come on at 5% brightness. but ramp up to 30% brightness up to 10 o'clock. And then maybe the 4,500 one will come on at 9, 10 o'clock and ramp up to 50% by midday. And then, so I've still got to work that bit out, and that's the really tricky bit. But it's doable. It's technically doable. I know it is. It's the coding behind it. But it allows us to fully emulate any kind of light conditions. I can even stick random patterns in there and create a cloudy day, for example, where the lights, I still get the same pattern, but not to the same intensity. And that's stage 2. I'll worry about that once I've got the first bit working. But it's going to be a few months yet, I think, before I'm anywhere near. But the potential's quite interesting.
All right. Well, Sam, welcome to the show. Thank you for returning to Animals at Home podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know I just played the clip for the viewers, or that's what I will have played during the intro, where you're talking about this incredible idea that you had last summer, which is 2019 in July or June, whenever we recorded that podcast. So you had this spark of a brilliant idea, and you are pretty much, I won't say you're done it, but you have a ton of it done and enough to show everybody and talk about. So why don't you tell everybody what your idea is and how you thought of it and kind of how you've been building on it since then?
Yeah, so obviously when we first recorded the podcast, I think you're right, I think it was June, July, some point last year, it was very much a kind of a pie in the sky idea. It was a thought in my head that I thought, unless I can find something out there that already does it, there's no chance in hell it exists, and there's no way I'm going to be able to build it. So the idea was stemmed from the fact that I was just fed up with having lights turn on and off abruptly. So even to the point where I stagger my lights. So I have halogens come on, I have UV come on, LEDs come on in whichever order, but staggered apart. So that it's not at least all at once, but you still have this sudden step change in brightness. So I really wanted to find something that could gradually bring at least the halogens and the LEDs on in a sort of more daylight type fashion, but not just based on a fixed 8 hours, 12-hour day or whatever it might be, but actually changing seasonally and following the day lengths of that species location automatically without having to change timers every single day. So that's kind of where the idea came from and stemmed from. I think I said in the clip a few months.
A few months of work.
Yeah, 14 months down the line, there's still at least a few months to go.
Yeah.
But I've made considerable progress. I have a kind of a working prototype kind of put together, and
is the idea, is it now what it is kind of as you've just made it? Is it different than what you thought that 18 months ago when you first mentioned? Like, are there aspects that are totally different than you would have imagined, or is it pretty close to what you thought? It's completely different.
Pretty much. I mean, the concept is roughly the same, but how I thought I was going to go about doing it is completely different. The initial idea was purely internet-based, kind of go and get daytimes from some kind of online API or database, or go and get like even things like getting the time from an NTP source online. It was all great ideas. And to actually start looking into what it is I'm trying to do, it's not actually possible. Well, it is to an extent, but then you're reliant on external data sources, which I did not want to do. So I've purposely made this unit 100% offline. It is completely standalone. It's completely independent with no external reliance, which is what I wanted. I did also have an idea of sort of integrating sort of weather conditions and stuff from like various weather stations out there. But actually, when you start looking into it, those weather stations don't exist anywhere near the ground level. They're usually 10, 20 foot up in the air or in urban areas, which for the purposes of what we would want to use it for is almost completely pointless.
Yeah.
So I binned that idea off quite rapidly, which was a shame because it was a good idea, but the data isn't out there globally enough for too many locations to warrant doing it, really.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons I always, it's good at looking at climate graphs and everything from the areas your animals are from, but you do have to be very careful that you're not just taking it from like the capital city where it's just concrete all around. Everything's going to be hotter and it's not quite the same. So as far as I want to get into exactly kind of what it is and how you've done it, but before, we do that, you were talking about, obviously the impetus for doing this was to avoid that step procedure of the lights coming on, the halogens coming on, the visible lights and the UV. What about that didn't you like? Obviously it's not natural, but was there any other reason other than just trying to replicate a natural sunrise sunset?
It's to kind of instigate natural behaviors more than anything else. So we know a lot of reptiles, if not nearly all of them, are stimulated by daylight. But not just, I mean, daylight can be anything from first thing at morning, which is fairly dim, to middle of the day. It can be ridiculous in some parts of the world, like the Snoring Desert or Mojave or things like the really hot arid places. It can be ridiculously bright. And different species react differently to different light levels depending on what they expect in the habitat. I think that's the best way to put it. So, I mean, a classic example, desert iguanas, for example, you will see them sort of first light, you'll see them coming out basking. They'll shoot away for a bit, and then once the sun's back up in the middle of the afternoon, they'll be the only ones out because most of the species, that would prey on them are hiding away at that time of the day. So they know that, okay, the sun's bright, it's the hottest part of the day. Obviously, temperature plays a part of it as well, but they think to themselves, okay, that means I can go out, it's safe. I mean, it's all theory, it's all kind of ideas, but the idea is hopefully I will see a lot more natural behavioral patterns in the species that I keep, as opposed to just, lights are on.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of time to wake up type thing.
Well, yeah, and it would be really cool to see the dawn and dusk behaviors specifically. Like, what are they doing when those lights are quite dim and before heat's on and whatnot? And also, like I've said to you before in private messages, I think that just the visual appearance of an enclosure going through a dawn or a dusk setting is so nice looking. It just looks beautiful to look at with these lights that are dim and you have this warm color. It just adds a new dimension to the enclosure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably more important for me, aesthetically for me, it makes the enclosure, because when you kit it out with the fake rock backgrounds that I do and you have these fully naturalistic environments, to be watching it and it's dark and then all of a sudden ping, it's full daylight, it's kind of like but then to actually sort of, from the testing I've done, I haven't been testing it in a viv, but just out in the open, it's even just gradually bringing the light on is kind of, I mean, that's the whole reason they invented alarm clocks like the glow light, which gradually come on and wake you up with light. It's exactly the same principle to us as it is, I assume, for reptiles. Again, it's assumption, but you look at species that are more dawn and dusk, like leopard geckos, or even the Mexican rosy that I've got over there. They are much more dawn and dusk species, and most of the day they'll hide away, come out occasionally. So then you've got that. Then you can create that difference between nocturnal species and daytime species, and then the species that are more active during those periods, sort of the dusk and the dawn. Yeah, it's just a whole extra layer that we can play with. So as far as what it is, because there's probably some people listening to this that haven't listened to episode number 25, the original one, and even though it was still sort of a theoretical idea, and I know a lot about it because you've been showing me along the way. So if someone has no clue what we're talking about right now, can you sort of run through what this idea is and how it works? I can try. As I said, it's all still in my head. I've written some of it down, but in essence,
and it's before you start, I'll say it sounds simpler than it is. When you say it on paper, it's like, oh, that should be easy, but it's way more complicated. So you can go ahead.
So I've kind of coined the term astronomical geographical vivarium controller is how I've deemed it. So there are already astronomical timers out there. Like things like your normal plugs, like these type of things, but the digital ones that you can actually set to be sunrise and sunset. But again, it comes on and comes off. So that's the astronomical element, using sort of day length, sunrise, sunset, meridian, and even to an extent in this project, solar altitude as well, because that has an effect on brightness, but we'll come on to that later. And then the geographical is obviously trying to replicate where the species come from. So the geographical part in this system is the user, or me, or whoever it might be, configuring a latitude, a longitude, and a time zone. Now the system will do the rest of the work with those figures. It can, with those three things, the latitude, longitude, time zone, it can automatically calculate the sunrise, the meridian, the sunset, the start of the start of dawn and the end of dusk. It can calculate many other points as well, but not needed for this project. And they're all just mathematical equations, rather complex ones, but I've simplified them a little bit. So they're not 100% accurate, plus or minus 2 minutes, but that's good enough. But then this system then at every single night at midnight recalculates that day's timings and then uses those to control the various channels that I'm controlling, i.e. LEDs, timer channels for UV, foggers, fans, misting, whatever, as well as eventually a dimming thermostat as well, all in one.
So at this point, mainly you're working on the LED control, I think, right? And I guess and probably the halogen and the UV as well.
So the the LED part is done, fully working and tested, and it works a treat. I think I posted a video on my Herp HQ channel, I think last week at the time of recording this, which shows a time lapse of it working, not with actual LEDs, but the values on the screen. I've now completed more or less the configuration of one of the timer channels, and there's going to be 3 in total, with 3 different functions. So there's the timer channel I've done, or the timer 1 as I call it, is simply an on-off timer. So you can set it, as I'll show you later, but you can set it like sunrise or sunset or meridian plus or minus up to an hour. So again, that value changes every day. And that one primarily be for the UV, because unfortunately we don't have the technology to dim UV.
Right.
In a meaningful, inexpensive way. There is ballasts out there that can do it, but you're talking thousands of pounds for these ballasts, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the UV is still on off, but at least I can control the length of it for the day.
And by the time the UV comes on, you'll already have the LEDs they're illuminating the enclosure already, so it's not like it's going to be a massive step from darkness to on, I assume. When does the UV come on inside the day?
So in terms of this system, the LEDs start at dawn, not sunrise. The average time between dawn and sunrise is something like 45 minutes to an hour. So first light of the day is not sunrise. It's actually, technically, it's when the solar altitude hits minus 18. That's when the first light of the day hits, and then it's minus 18 the other end for the end of dusk. I've started my dawn at about -9, -10, because anything below that or above that, depending on which way you look at it, like -11, 12, 13, is not really reproducible in LEDs. It would be too bright to produce that level of dimness. So I started my dawn a little bit later. So that's when the LEDs come on, and then they'll kind of ramp up to throughout the day and go back down. The UV at the moment I've got configured for sunrise plus 45 minutes and sunset minus 45 minutes. So again, the beauty of this system is completely configurable on the front end using the interface. So I can set plus or minus 60 minutes for either dawn start, sunrise, meridian, sunset, or dawn dusk end. So I can have an hour either side of those. So once I actually get it into a Viv and start looking at it as a complete unit, I can play about with those. But I've just sort of initial figures, I've gone with sunrise plus 45. And
then what about halogen? Where would you mix that in?
So the halogens will be on a dimming thermostat, but they won't be, you won't get that horrible first kind of light in the morning when your thermostat turns on. It thinks it should be 35 and it's 20 in the room, and it goes 100% power and then drops to nothing. So the plan is for that. Again, I will have the same start and finish times configurable. So I'll be able to do like sunrise plus whatever, or sunset plus, but I'll probably do them sunrise to sunset. But the idea is, again, I'm still working this bit out. This is kind of the end bit, but the idea is, so what it'll do at sunrise or whenever the start time is, it will basically take the current temperature and use that as its starting point, and then gradually ramp that temperature up to the set point. So you won't get this 8 o'clock in the morning, oh, it's meant to be 35 degrees, 100% power. It will read the current temperature before it starts and use that as the starting point. So in effect, you're starting at 0% power and then basically gradually build it.
Oh, that's cool.
Up to the set point. That's the idea anyway.
That is the annoying thing about having, because I have a dimming thermostat on a halogen with the Brazilian rainbow boa enclosure behind me, and I've thought about, I don't even know if you could technically do this. I think you probably could, having an actual outlet dimmer plugged in between the light and the dimming stat, so the bulb never can hit that 100% power. So, the thermostat will come on, it's going to want to bump up the temperature, but maybe I'll only give it 50% of power, because it is annoying that when it comes on, it just, immediately ramps up to 100% for like the 45 minutes, and then it ramps back down, which is obviously exactly opposite of what we want.
Well, you've got the opposite effect as well, because, I use the microclimate stats, and I have on some of these enclosures, in fact, all of them, I use 4 temperature set points for the day. So I've got the one first thing in the morning, I've got the one at lunchtime, sort of mid-afternoon, climbs up, and then it drops back down again. You've also got the opposite problem where it drops back down, it just turns off completely until it hits the next set point, and then comes back on to 40, 50, 60%. So you've got both sides of it, and I'm hoping I can come up with some kind of solution that... there you go. Not like suddenly just turning off in the background.
Yeah, you got a sunset happening back there.
Yeah, so hopefully I can come up with a solution. I haven't quite worked out how I'm going to do it yet. I've kind of got the logic of using the current set temperature points as a starting point rather than a fixed point. But yeah, we'll go from there.
And then the actual LEDs, I don't know if you had mentioned yet, as far as what you're using, I think it's just 3 strips and they're different temperatures, right? Yeah,
so there's 3 LED channels, which are independently controlled by the system. One is 2,700 Kelvin, one is 4,000 Kelvin, and one is 6,000 or 6,500 Kelvin. So you've got the real orange light, you've got the midday kind of neutral, and then you've got the real bright sort of height of the light kind of time.
So as far as how those are controlled, they're independently controlled, like you said. But how did you program the system to have the percentages of the power of each one, oscillate throughout the day? Like where's that number coming from? How do you know what you're trying to replicate there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it took a lot of fiddling. So I had a bit of a chat with Frances Baines to see if she knew of any papers that existed that had a correlation between the height of the sun and how bright the daylight was. Although she didn't directly point me to one, she did point me to a source where I did find something related, and from that, a few conversations with a few people down the line, I finally came across a paper, and the title was exactly what I wanted. The title was Daylight Brightness and Kelvin Temperature as a Function of Solar Altitude.
Oh, that must have been such a dream to find.
Yeah, until I saw the algorithm in it.
Oh, no.
So the algorithm, it's ridiculous. It was like half a page of A4 algorithm. It was stupidly complex. But it basically gave you, it was only an average, because obviously cloud cover affects it and various other things affect it, but it was an average, and I think they used 40 different locations across the world, across a whole year, every day, to work out this algorithm and the averages. And it basically, it would give you a lumen value, or in this case it was a lux value, so lumens per square meter, an average color temperature, depending on what the altitude of the sun was above the horizon. So I kind of took that, dumbed it down a bit, kept tweaking the algorithm until sort of using Excel, as it were, to kind of come up with a naturalistic curve that as closely as possible matched what they saw. The biggest trouble is I had to match it to 0 to 100 in terms of percentage brightness and power. Right. So that's where the real struggle was. But it's really hard to explain. It's easier to show. And I've got a nice little chart here.
Yeah, let's see the chart.
Let me see if I can switch over. There we go. So
I'll say right now, if anybody is listening, this is an episode that you'll probably want to come back to YouTube and watch the clips, and I'll make sure I timestamp them for everybody, because Sam has some great visuals to show us as well. If you're listening, it's okay. You can still keep listening, but you'll want to come back. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, so this is an output in graph form from the algorithm that I came up with based on the one in this paper, that was kind of done in Excel. So basically this top one here, so both of these charts are for Tucson, Arizona. The top one is the summer solstice, so the longest day of the year, and the bottom one is the winter solstice.
Wow, that is so cool.
Which is the shortest day of the year.
Yeah.
So I don't know how well you can see the figures on the side, but it's basically 0 to 100 on the side. And then the 3 different lines are the 3 different LED channels. So the 2700, the 4000, and the 6000. There is still some minor tweaking to do, and it's more related to a bug I've got in the LED channels where I can't start them at 0. I have to start them with a value. So I need to work on that. But eventually, the only bit you'll see at the very beginning and the very end is just the 2700 Kelvin. You won't.
Gotcha.
So the 4000 and the 6500 will be off by sunset and on at sunrise. So the dawn and dusk bits will only be the 2700 Kelvin. That's the idea anyway. So
you basically have these 3 channels and you're mixing them to try to hit that temperature that you had from that algorithm from that paper. So you just kind of, whatever the percentage would have to mix and match to hit roughly what that paper showed.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very, very loose interpretation.
Yeah.
It's just, you will never replicate daylight with LEDs. No. It's as simple as that, and not in terms of brightness, in terms of color temperature and the quality of the light. Nothing beats daylight. You won't get anywhere near it. We can get close, or close-ish, as close as we can get with the reasonably priced technology we have. But these charts and the sort of the arches look relatively similar to the patterns that they were displaying in the paper, which is useful.
Yeah, and getting this close, even though this might be very far, it's still much closer than the average person just chucking their lights on, at 8 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock at night or whatever. So this is just an amazing. It's crazy that you thought of this and you were able to put it together. And then as far as the actual programming itself, it's on. I don't know if you had mentioned what sort of computer you're using to program on and to contain this.
Not on here, I haven't. No, I've mentioned it on some of the posts on Facebook and stuff, but it's all based on an Arduino Mega.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all an Arduino Mega R3. I did start with a Raspberry Pi,
which was in the original clip you'd mentioned the Raspberry Pi, but that didn't work, right?
No, I had a lot of conflicts because the Raspberry Pi runs an operating system and then you run your stuff on top of it. I just had so many conflicts with it. It was just so bloated. I just didn't get on with it. So then I switched to a Arduino Uno, which is the little brother of the Mega, and rapidly ran out of storage space for the program. So upgraded to the Mega, and so far so good. I've got enough space so far. And I should have enough space to finish.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing above the Mega without adding something in externally. So I'd rather try and avoid that.
Well, it is just such a cool idea. And so as far as the functionality of it goes, when you actually built a user interface, you have a screen that you can access, and it's a touch screen, so you can set it up. So maybe you could just walk through how you use it. So if you're going to, you pick a location that you want, what do you do from there with the screen? Theoretically, I know it's not 100% done, but really a lot of it is done.
I can do better than that. I can try and show you.
Okay, let's show us.
If it works. So I've actually set up a couple of cameras. Hopefully I can do a demo and actually show you a live demo of a prototype system.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
and see what happens. So now I just switch my cameras to here, which I've already done. So this is sort of the main home interface. Ignore the temperature bit up here because that is just a label as part of a mock-up at the moment. Obviously, we've got the date time up in the corner, and then down here we've got sort of the sunrise time for that date. We've got the meridian time, and we've also got the sunset time as well. But if you click into here, I don't know how well you can see that.
It's actually really clear.
You can actually see the whole stats for the day as well. So you can actually see when dawn starts. You can actually see when dusk ends and the full day length. That will update every single day on a daily basis. So not just I've not programmed any of these times. These are calculated by the system just on the latitude, the longitude, and the time zone and the current date time.
That's what I find so amazing, and I guess it kind of makes sense, but all of this is just mathematically driven. Like you said, it's not connected to the internet. There's an algorithm to use the altitude of the sun to give you these numbers, and the accuracy is really good.
I think it depends. The higher longitude you go, or latitude, can't remember which one it is, the less accurate it gets.
Okay.
So I think it's accurate to plus or minus 5 minutes up to plus and minus 72. North and south. I can never remember which one's latitude and longitude, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So I think above that and beyond that, I think it goes up to a sort of 10 minutes plus or minus. But to be fair, the exact timing is not the main purpose of this. The main purpose of
Right.
this is to create the daily change and the seasonal length change. So if it's 10 minutes out every day, it doesn't matter, because you're still going to get the change in day length every single day throughout the year, and that's kind of the main point of it, really.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's just an information screen. You can see up there it says a season to implement, end goal, as it were. I'll have built into this automatic seasonal variation as well, so
very cool.
I'll be able to set which months or which season, and then give each season a set of parameters to follow, and it will gradually change between them. It's kind of the idea anyway.
I guess as far as seasons go, the lighting is not going to change because that's all part of it anyway. But I guess would that be more temperature, the temperature control?
The lighting will absolutely change. You can see from the two graphs that I showed you earlier,
Right.
The winter solace, it doesn't actually exceed 70% brightness.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So I thought that was already programmed as part of how the LEDs were functioning anyway.
So yeah, no, actually, it doesn't. So at the moment, the LED channels don't have any seasonal variation.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
they will follow the top curve depending on the length of the day. But eventually, when I get the seasonal stuff in, they will drop a certain percentage depending on what the season is. Eventually, hopefully. But that bottom graph that we had up is what the winter one would look like. Eventually, would not exceed 70%. But yeah, temperature is probably the biggest benefit to it. So for example, the winter, the plan is I can set a max temperature, I don't know, 25, 26, 28 degrees, whatever. Summer could be 45, or even autumn could be 35.
Right.
But between autumn and winter, it will gradually change over 7-10 days or something, rather than going from last day of autumn to first day of winter instantly. I've still got a lot of thinking to do on that one yet.
Right.
That's kind of the idea. But yeah, so just back to the interface. So this is the main screen. This is the one I'll be up most of the time. Unfortunately, because of the time of day here in the UK, all the lights are off because it's 9:20. But what I can do is I can also show you some of the settings. So obviously, simple one, time and date. I'm just going to change that. I'm going to pretend it's a different time. Let's say 8:20 in the morning. And I can automatically turn DST on and off as well, which is a feature I think I wish all thermostats had, because it's a pain in the backside having to change them every time.
And everybody just would have gone through that last 2 weeks ago or whatever, and it is such a pain in the ass.
Yeah, so obviously the date and time is completely configurable. And then every time that the date and time is changed or saved, it recalculates the day as well, in case you've changed the date or whatever. Location settings. So again, this is where I configure the latitude, the longitude, and the time zone. Again, the time zone can be changed just by doing that. So this is Tucson, Arizona. And again, I can set the latitude and the longitude quite easily in there. I'm not going to change it. But again, if I save these settings, that also triggers a recalculation of the day, because the location might have changed. And we'll go from there. Season settings doesn't do anything yet. So then we've got the channel settings. The only two implemented here are obviously LED and timer 1 of the timer channels. The LEDs at the moment are nothing more than enabled or disabled. So I will enable them. What time did I set it for? About 8:10, wasn't it?
Yeah, 20
so
past.
In theory, when I save these, you should see
there we go.
A fairly dim LED, because obviously it's 8:10 in the morning. You can see the 3 different colors.
Yeah.
If I put my hand here, you can see the 3 different colors. So I think this one is the 2,700, this one is the 4,000, and this one is the 6,000. These aren't the final LEDs I'm going to use. This is just scraps I had lying around. I'll probably use something like the middle one, because you can see it's a lot less dotty.
Yeah.
So that one is 120 LEDs per meter. These outer 2 are only 60. So you get what you call spotting.
Right.
So again, this is just to prove the concept. I haven't actually chosen the LEDs I'm going to use yet, but it'll be something along these lines. So we've enabled them. And then the feature I'm kind of pretty much finished doing at the moment is timer 1. And this is just a simple on-off timer, probably for the UV. Because obviously, as I said earlier, unfortunately, there's no technology for the UV yet. But this timer is purely astronomical. There is no option to set a fixed time. It would defeat the whole object of me wanting to build this system.
Exactly.
So I have 5 different options. You can set these options for either of them. We've got dawn start, we've got sunrise, we've got meridian, which is center of the day, the highest point for the sun. And we've got sunset, and then we've got dusk end. And again, the offset can currently be plus or minus 60 minutes.
So that's just basically picking a point through the day that's based off on an astronomical, either the dusk, the dawn, the meridian, any of those places, and then that allows the timer to click on or off, plus or minus whatever minutes you choose.
Yeah, so it's about not picking a fixed point in time and creating a fixed length of time. So, because obviously, if you do them on at 8 and off at 8, that's a 12-hour day. Whereas here, if I do them on at sunrise, off at sunset, that's going to be different every single day. Now, most day-to-day changes in most parts of the world are no more than a minute.
Yeah.
So it's a minute per day. I mean, it does increase depending on the season, but for example, those 2 charts I showed you, I think it's nearly a 4-hour difference between those 2 days. But that 4 hours is spread across half of the year. So it's not a big change, and it's that gradual change between seasons and day length that I really wanted to emulate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, unfortunately, as I said, with the UV, you can't dim it. So it is on or it's off. So I'll have a play about with these timings once I get it in a Viv, because I want the UV to come on when the enclosure's already fairly bright. I mean, the plans I've got with the LED tape is probably going to total about 15,000 lumens in the enclosure. There's going to be 6 meters of LED tape, 2 meters of each color. Somewhere between 15 and 20,000 lumens just in the LED tape itself. So in theory, I should be able to work out what the lumen is of the UV when it's on in my head, sort of, and then work out what point there's enough lumens from the 3 channels of LEDs, and let's just play about with the figures and see what I can come up with.
Yeah.
You'll notice the other little lamp came on.
Yeah.
Just over there. So that's just simulating the timer at the moment. So when the timer is on, that's on, because I enabled the channel. So to give you a bit of a contrast, I mean, in terms of the interface, there's not much more to it than that at the moment.
So there's your bar chart.
Yeah, so there's the bar chart. So that's showing the percentage of each of the channels at the moment. Bearing in mind it's 8:23 in the morning now in Tucson. We know sunrise was at 7:10. We know that dawn started at 6:28. So we're about 2 and a bit hours, 2 hours, 10 minutes into the day, and it's still fairly dim. So it's effectively 300% because it's 3 lots of 100%, and we're at probably 18, 16 and 10, the mass is not great, 50%. So we're about a 1/6 brightness for the day. But the curve at the beginning and the end of the day is relatively shallow. Once you get just sort of after a decent amount of time after sunrise, I think about an hour and a half, it really gets quite steep. So those percentages will go up quite quickly from probably around about now. And yeah, they're just an indication as to what the brightness of each channel is. And then obviously the timer channels, we can see this one's now on. Obviously it'll show off if it's off. Underneath, the other 2 are just marked as disabled because they're not turned on. They're not even implemented. Yeah, but if I just change it's quite hard to use this one. So if I just change the time to say, I don't know, let's be 12:45. I've got to watch my eyes here. I have fixed the exposure on this other camera, so hopefully you should actually notice how much brighter. Obviously, this is going to jump because I'm going from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, but it should give you an idea of the difference. If I actually press save, might help, mightn't it? Yeah. And then we can put it back, say.
Actually, can you go back to even though it's flicking right now, can you go back to the bar chart just so we can see?
Oh yes, you can see.
Yeah.
So yeah, now you can see that 12:30.
Everything's ramped up.
Everything's ramped up. The LEDs are sending the cameras haywire, but hopefully you're getting enough from it. Yeah, so you can obviously see there that we're 100% on that channel, and then I think it's 97.5% on those 2. So this one in the middle of the day always stays higher than the other 2. and then we'll go from there. But I'm going to pop it back down again.
To let the cameras cool down.
The thing is, this is only about 800 lumens in total.
So just imagine if you have 15,000.
No, probably about 1,000 lumens between the three of those, because they're quite low power ones in comparison. But let's just go up to, and I'll say 5:30. You should hopefully see it dim back down.
There we go. That was perfect.
And obviously, you notice now that the timer's gone off.
Right, because we're close enough to sunset. Or
yeah,
dawn,
because the timer is sunset minus 45 minutes. So,
right.
Well, we can see what sunset was. Yeah, sunset was 17:19. So we're past sunset now, which eventually these two here won't be on when I fix my bug. But the LEDs will now stay on until 2 minutes past 6.
Right.
When the dusk ends, which is when the true nighttime starts.
Yeah.
I mean, there will always still be light on at that time. It's just not something we can reproduce easily.
Because even at 1%, it's still way too bright.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Especially, well, the trouble is I've got a catch-22. I need to use bright LEDs so I can replicate middle of the day brightness. But 1% of a brighter LED is a lot more than 1% of a dimmer. So I've toyed with the ideas about having 2 sets of LEDs, but then that's 6 channels of LEDs. It's not worth it. So I basically just brought the dawn and the dusk times in a bit. So we've still got a dawn and a dusk, and it averages about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the location per day. So you've still got that ramp where you've got nothing else but just a dim glow of orange LEDs for sunrise and sunset.
Do you worry at all about interference from the light in your home, like the actual real sunlight that's coming in, or do you? I mean, you can't really get around that.
So this room that I'm in doesn't actually have any windows.
That's
it's
nice.
a converted garage, which is actually my office as well, where I work from home. So thankfully, it's got no external light. This room is under a massive renovation at the moment. I've basically stripped everything out, got rid of all the old vivs. I'm building all new ones, a whole new 12 vivs along this wall eventually. But I've actually had a bit of a smart idea for that one as well. I'm going to add another channel to this thing, which will control a roller blind in front of the viv. So the roller blind will come up at sunrise and go down at sunset. So dusk and dawn can be purely the light that's in the viv and nothing else. But we'll see where we get with that.
And then as far as because this is a question that I originally had, and people might be thinking of this. So you live in England, and you're programming in a longitude and latitude for Tucson, Arizona.
Yep.
Obviously, those are massive differences in time zone. What are you doing to combat the fact that the sun is rising 6 hours later than where you exist?
It's still rising and setting at the same time per se. It's just an offset. Mm-hmm. So the whole point of that time zone is to basically offset this. So when I do my calculations, based on this minus what the time or plus what the time zone is.
Right.
So I'm doing all the calculations with the actual local time, but emulating that into my local time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I mean, if you were in America, for example, you would set this clock here to be your local time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then your time zone would still, because everything's based off UTC or GMT, regardless of the calculation. So even if your local time is a US time zone in Arizona, for example, so if you're in the same time zone, you still put -7 in the Arizona for the time zone for the latitude and longitude, it would still calculate correctly.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, it's all done on offsets. It needs to know. It doesn't even need to know where you are. Effectively, this system's configured as if you're configuring it as if you're there locally. So it thinks that at the moment this is 5:30 in Tucson, and you're just emulating 5:30 in Tucson at 5:30 here. If that makes sense. It took me a while to get my head around it, and it's actually the whole reason why NTP didn't work. Because NTP always tries to change your time zone. Depending on the source, or you have to give it a time zone. But obviously, I don't want my time zone, but I need my time zone for my time, but I don't want to change the time that I've set. And it started getting a bit complicated. So I thought, why do I need it? All I've got to do is, I've got an RTC in this, a real-time clock, which is a battery operated crystal ticker clock, which is exactly the same things that you get in the microclimates, EVOs, and probably things like the Herp stats and stuff like that probably will have inbuilt clocks which are fairly accurate, So, I mean, this won't lose more than a second a month, if that, which is good enough. And I've got the manual adjustment on the time. So if I need to change it, I can change it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it is funny because I remember when I first asked that question to you as well. I'm like, how are you going to do that? Are you going to have to make it, go to a different longitude or whatever? And then you realize, yeah, there's no difference in time. It's just when it comes on. You just want to match it with your own time.
Exactly
it's interesting.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it really in terms of the interface. I mean, these timers here, the only other thing I have done is just the ability to give them a name. Really, just so I could, I don't know, call something like, well, let's just pretend that says UV.
UV.
So yeah, you can basically just label them, so you know what they are. But that's one thing I haven't really explained is what the difference is between the 3 timers actually. And I'll do that very quickly. So obviously the first timer is on off. The second timer is going to be what I'm calling a duration timer. So it can have 4 set points in the day. So again, those same set points, sunrise, sunset, meridian, whatever, plus or minus an hour. Although I might make it less than an hour because there's 4, and you can basically set up to 4 time points per day and say, and again, individually for each one, say, right, sunrise plus 5 minutes, turn this on for 30 seconds. And then, I don't know, mid-afternoon, whatever time it might be, turn it on for 50 seconds, so on. So that's for something like a mister or a fogger or something like that. So that would be a 230 volt system. Sorry, UK. So, and then the last one will be exactly the same as that, but for a 12 volt circuit. So something like fans, for example. So I can have the fans come on for like a couple of minutes every 4 times a day, for example. So that's what the difference between the timers are going to be. I may add one more in. I haven't decided yet, but until I can think of a need for one, I'll leave it as that because that's enough work. Get this working first.
Well, that was going to be my next question as far as where do you see this developing beyond what you've done? So I guess that probably answers it right there, adding in some more climate control features. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of what I'm developing at the moment, it's very much for me. So it's very much tuned to what I'm trying to achieve. So obviously I tend to have more focus and specialism in the sort of Southwestern American state species, Arizona, California. So all the research I'm doing to build this is focused on, okay, what's it like in Arizona? What's it like in California? What's it like in Badger, California, or Sonoran, or Texas, things like that. So obviously to make this anything more than a personal project, it would need a hefty lot of work. But in terms of future development for my use, obviously the seasonal stuff I'd really like to get in there, but that's probably going to be the last thing to go in. The thermostat is next after the 2 timer channels. So there's still plenty of work to do, and there's lots of little bugs and stuff to fix. Lots of error handling and catching. That timer channel is a classic example. I can set the off time before the on time. So it would basically never come on because it recalculates the time every day. So that's kind of one of the downsides to this is you can't set a time duration over midnight. So you can't say come on at 10 p.m. and go off at 2 a.m.
So if you want to run foggers during that time.
If you wanted to run foggers, you can run anything up to midnight and from midnight. You just can't run
through
over midnight.
Yeah.
But again, for my purposes, for what I want to do with it, that's absolutely fine. To take this any further, I don't know, so many people are like, oh, get a Kickstarter going or get this made into a retail product. It would have to have so many changes in terms of its flexibility. It's not far off, but it's a lot of work would need to be involved. And the fact that it relies on the person knowing how to wire up and understanding LED strips as well. It's not a plug and play system. And I currently have no intention of making it one.
Yeah, that's so. And when most people see your project, they always go, "Oh, when can I buy one?" And it's like, well, this is, very, very much prototype and very much specific to you. Like to take it from that to the average Joe Schmo that can buy one in a store and plug in, like you say, there's many steps between that and what it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, my main focus is get a working prototype.
Yeah.
And then go from there. I mean, I'm not ruling out doing something, but it's highly unlikely. It's immensely expensive to take something through productization. I know from experience of the industry I work in, we're talking tens of thousands of pounds to get something like this productized, because I'd also have to develop an LED light unit to go with it, so it can be plug and play. So I'm not ruling it out, but I don't think certainly not any time in the near future.
And that's the thing,
is a shame. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, people listening to this podcast will go, oh, that's too bad. But at the same time, like, most reptile keepers probably wouldn't use it because there's most people are beginners, right? They're just getting into the hobby. Like, this is just way too advanced for most people. It's an amazing idea, and I think every single person listening to it would love to have that. But you're not going to sell that in PetSmart.
No, and not at the price it would likely need to be to make it worth productizing. I mean, you hear of people moaning that a 50 quid stat is too much. And I mean, even like the microclimates I use, they're like £100, 110 quid to retail, and people moan that's expensive. This type of thing to be productized. I mean, the cost of the hardware is not that much, but you obviously got to recoup the development and R&D costs that would go into it. And easily this would be 3 times the price for a microclimate at least.
Yeah,
I dread to think probably more, but in its current state, it wouldn't get anywhere near that.
So as far as for your purposes, you're working on this prototype. When it is somewhat functional for you to test, it's going to go into one of your enclosures? What animals are you going to test it on first?
It won't be going near any animals until I run it in an enclosure for at least probably 6 months.
Smart.
Continuous day-to-day running, preferably over a summer and sort of into an autumn and into winter, because I want to see the seasonal changes. I need to make sure that the thermostat is accurate, and that's probably the key thing. So yeah, I'd be surprised if it goes anywhere near an animal before the end of summer next year.
Right.
And then it'll go on all of them at once once I build them all. But hopefully by that point I'll have some of the new vivs up as well.
And then to replicate it, obviously that's one unit. Is it easy to replicate to make a second unit and a third unit?
No.
You just copy the program? Or no, it's not easy.
In terms of the code, yeah, it's just upload the code to a new Arduino Mega. Building the circuitry around it is a bit more different. I've made it dark, haven't I? So you probably can't see it that well, but it's a bit dark. Hang on, I've got an idea. So I turn the auto exposure on now.
Perfect.
You can actually kind of see to an extent. I mean, that big grey box is just the powerhouse. It's just keeping all the power cables out of the way, so little children like my 5-year-old don't put their hand straight on it.
Yeah.
And then to next to that is the Arduino Mega. And then just in front of that there's 2 units there. One of them's a twin relay, which is the on-off. It's basically a switch, which is controlled by the Arduino. You've got the little clock next to that, and then you can see 3 little devices over near to where the notepad is.
Yep.
So those are the LED dimmers, PWM dimmers. So at the moment it's lots of tiny little components, which makes it easy enough to put together, but not very reliable. So I'm kind of just now starting the process of taking all those bits and putting them and designing them onto one board, with some help from a couple of friends. So hopefully it will actually go on to like a custom PCB, in which case it will be very easy to put together, because it'll be one PCB, Arduino, slot into PCB, plug in, go. Maybe not quite that simple, but but more or less it'll be like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it is an amazing project. We'll continue to follow as it proceeds into the future and see what you do, because it is one of those things that not a lot of people think of, and then when you start thinking of it, you have to it's just amazing how complicated that is. Even though it seems like a simple task, but it's definitely not. So it's pretty cool.
It's been a steep learning curve.
And that's the thing about you, is this is not, you self-taught most of this stuff.
4 months ago, I hadn't touched an Arduino.
That's amazing.
At all. I mean, for the work I do, I do a lot of bit of scripting and programming and stuff, but it's all Windows based. It's all sort of object-based programming. Programming C++ on an Arduino is a completely different kettle of fish in terms of language and stuff like that, but the logic is relatively similar. So I've been able to pick that up quite quickly, because it's kind of second nature writing code, but it's a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
Doing it. But yeah, 4 months ago, I hadn't touched an Arduino.
That's incredible. So imagine in another year from now, we'll have you back on the show and you'll have all these extra advancements. It's crazy.
We'll see. We'll see.
So I think, did you say you were going to do 12 enclosures in there? In your garage? So you're going to, so right now, how many do you have? There's the 3 behind you. I know there's a couple other ones.
There's 1, 2, 3 there, and there's 1 there. That's it.
So you want to do like the 3 stack that you have here, you want to have 4 of those?
They're going.
Oh, they're going.
They're going. I haven't even finished building that one yet, and it'll go. That'll be the last to go. So this currently holds all my animals because I've downsized massively when I moved house at the beginning of the year.
Right.
To purely focus on Southwestern American species. So all of these, I mean, you've got 3 scaleperas up there, got the 4 desert iguanas down the bottom, the rosy boas in that one. This is the new desert iguana enclosure in the middle, and then I've got a long-nosed leopard lizard coming for the bottom. But yeah, so this is a converted extended garage, so it's kind of 10 meters long, but only 2.5 meters wide. So I'm pretty much sat on the one wall here, and it's basically garage width. UK size garage width.
Yeah.
Because we have small garages over here.
Yeah, we have these double sized, triple sized.
Yeah. So it's a really long room, but basically this whole wall is going to be basically 150 by 70 by 70 enclosures.
Wow.
Stacked too high. So sorry, not 12 enclosures, 10 enclosures, because they'll wrap around the corner at the bottom. So yeah, 10 enclosures of that size.
So are you going to build those, or are those being custom built? Because I think the last time we talked to you, you had a unit custom built.
Yeah, that's gone now. I sold that. And just through the door over there is the first set of cut plywood to build the first 2.
Okay, so you're going to do it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thankfully, woodworking runs in the family. My dad's a builder, so it kind of, I can get my hands dirty with a bit of wood and put stuff together. So I'm not too fussed with that. But it'll be the first time I've actually built my own. Well, kind of a vivarium. I've built other animal enclosures as well, but.
So why 10? Was it 10 just because that's what fits in the space, or do you
that's
have?
What fits.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's nothing more than that. I mean, I've even got. I know exactly what species are going to go in all of them as well, and I've literally have it planned, written down.
Okay, tell us what you got. I want to know what you're getting.
So I haven't got them all yet, but it's basically going to be desert iguanas, the blue spiny lizard scaleperas, which I've already got, the long-nosed leopard lizard, which is coming, which will be going in the bottom one behind me. The rosy boa I've already got, the banded geckos, and then probably not 100% confirmed, but probably 3 snakes then. Be the grey banded king snake, the San Diego mountain king, and probably probably some other type of rat snake. I'm not 100% sure what type, but it'll all be from that region, sort of Southern American states.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and I think if I was to redo my hobby again, I would really try to focus on a part of the world that I really like, because it's much easier just to maintain, because the room doesn't have to be different things. You can keep the room to work it towards your advantage, and of course with the lighting and everything as well. But is there something about that area that you just love? Like, why fixate on a very small area in the world?
I don't really know where it came from. I think probably the desert iguanas is what kicked it off. I mean, to be honest, I was starting to lose interest a bit in the hobby and keeping reptiles probably not long after we spoke last time, which is probably why I didn't get kickstarted in this. And then obviously I moved house back in January, February this year, and I kind of took that opportunity to go, right, okay, I don't want to keep all these species. I want to focus on something. I want to give myself a focus to keep myself interested, and it completely rebloomed everything that I loved about the hobby. It was the research and being able to look into one particular area and really focus all my energy into replicating habitats from one part of the world. So it wasn't as much because I wanted to pick somewhere, it was something to focus my energy on to sort of reinvigorate my interest as it were. And it certainly did, and some, and I probably haven't been more into it than I am now, to be honest.
Well, I love that, because that's sort of a theme that I've actually mentioned in the last couple episodes, is the importance of having a goal and a direction with your hobby. And I think so many times people end up, you just grab, you grab a bunch of animals, I want that, and then you end up with this sort of menagerie, and your focus is just totally scattered. And I think that's probably exactly the experience you're talking about, is you end up losing interest in it because you just feel kind of overwhelmed, and there's just too many things happening. So if you can narrow the focus to something super tight, I can totally understand how that would just reinvigorate you.
Yeah, it gives you a focus. And obviously then, I mean, the area I've picked, I mean, the species list is vast.
Right.
I mean, there's 1,000,001 different species you could keep from Arizona, California, sort of northern Mexico, Texas. So there is just hundreds of different species to choose from. You're spoiled for choice. It's not the same everywhere, but I mean, for some people, it's focusing on a particular sort of genus of animals. For others, it's an area. For others, it's a whole country, a continent, or whatever. But it's like Francis, you had on last week, is very much rat snakes.
Yeah,
and that's his thing. So it certainly gives you a focus and something to really hone in on.
So I forget what animals you had that you no longer have. I know there was the mantella, the dart frogs, and what else was there?
Yeah, so all the mantellas are gone. They actually went before I moved out because I couldn't keep them cool enough. In the old house, it was quite a warm house, so I moved them on pretty sharpish once I realised they weren't doing so well. They're thriving now, which is good. The Yakis I had, which have gone up to a local college, and they're part of the animal training and education up there now. They were gifted. I've still got the tortoise. He's got a big table in the front room and in the process of building an enclosure outside. And I've still got my last remaining Amazon milk frog, which is an animal I will never get rid of until it dies. It was the first reptile / amphibian I ever got, and it's currently 13 years old, which for an Amazon milk frog is quite impressive.
Yeah, that is impressive.
So, I mean, I brought it and it was the size of like my baby finger thumbnail. And she's pretty big now. I mean, she's getting old. She's getting quite lethargic, but she's still eating. She's still fairly active, but she's the last of the 3 I brought. So it's quite a nostalgic feeling for her. So she isn't going anywhere. She'll stay here till the end.
Interesting. Yeah. So you do still have a few others, but they're not part of the Sonoran, Arizona theme in this garage.
The tortoise is banned from going anywhere. It's the wife's, not mine. So
okay.
that's she had him before me. So
that's not going anywhere.
That's not going anywhere. So no, he's got a nice big enclosure being built outdoors as we speak.
So as far as was it a Herman's tortoise? I forget.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and so as far as being outside in your climate, how many months do you get where he can be out there, or can he be out there for the whole time if you have a greenhouse?
So I am building a greenhouse section, which in theory I could keep heated all year round and it would keep him active all year round, but obviously that kind of defeats the object. But the plan is to allow him to naturally hibernate out there. So in the winter months, I'll probably put some kind of like tube heater in there and just set it as like to trigger at like 10 degrees or something like that, just to keep the frost out.
Yeah.
But more or less let it drop for the winter, and he should, if I plan to put some big sort of sandy soily patches in there, he'll just dig down for the winter and that'll be it. But we shall see. But I reckon he'll probably go down end of October, November, and probably come up early Feb.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, but other than that, it could be out there all year round and hibernate out there.
Very cool. So as far as the one enclosure I want to talk about, I think your most recent animal was the rosy boa, or is that right? Rosy boa, that was the most recent one.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so back in July I got that one,
and
along with 2 more Scaleperas to go with the male. They came
okay.
At the same time.
Well, and you do this unbelievable job of setting up the enclosures. Like obviously you have this light genius on you. You're doing all this crazy programming, but also the actual decor and the way you set the enclosures up is really amazing. Can you tell people how you do that fake rock work? I don't know if we talked about it last time, but I think we may have, but I want to
a bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so I'll post pictures as well so people can see.
I mean, to be fair, every bit of rock work I've done differently.
Okay.
So the Desert Iguana one, which is probably the first one people saw, which I didn't like at all in the end because it just didn't look natural, but it was the first one I did. And then I did this one above me, which unfortunately because of the light you can't really see. And then I did the rosy boa one, which is fairly recent. And then this is the one I'm currently building.
Right.
At the moment, which has actually got where's my finger? There it is. So you see these little black holes. There's one there and there's one just over there.
Yeah.
They're actually PVC pipes.
Oh, cool.
So they're burrows, and that burrow actually goes down and comes out through the outside of the viv. And I've got a little recycled plastic boarded box with a hole in it with a sliding out lid, which I can put on the side, so that can be the nest box, which is easily accessible. But so this is the last one I did, and I learned from that one to do that one. I learned from that one to do this one.
Right.
And it's just always evolving and learning techniques. I mean, I'm not an expert at it. I've literally done probably 4 or 5 enclosures, but it's, as I say, I get so many messages, people like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And I say, I just do it and see how it comes out. And then the thing is, no rock is going to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfectly shaped rock.
Yeah.
Just get some polystyrene, hack away at it, use a blowtorch, not like a blowtorch, like a hot blowgun, like for doing shrink wrap and stuff.
Yeah.
Blow it across, which gets rid of all the sharp edges, unless you want sharp edges, and then cover it in, I think these 2, well actually these 3 have all been with like tile adhesive, like flexible tile adhesive. I think you call it thin set mortar over there.
Oh, okay.
In the US. I'm not sure about Canada, I'm afraid, but it's like flexible tile adhesive is the key, because then it flexes with the heat without cracking. And then on top of that, it's just great. I mean, that one was a single color of great, so that one's quite monotone. I like it. It looks good, but it's like you can see this one has got different colors in it. So there's actually 3 different color grapes in that one, like a really dark, almost black brown, and then like a chocolate brown, and then kind of like this beige quite heavily on top. So you see this sort of sandstony beige, but you've got these flecks of darker brown and black coming through it. So that's the same process I used for the one in the rosy boa.
Yeah, and the rosy boa one just has such a cool dimension and color to it, so it's awesome.
Yeah, I was quite chuffed with how that came out, actually. It was the first time using multiple different colour groats, and how it came out.
And then as far as the other thing I know people ask you about, especially with the rosy boa, is the substrate, because the substrate looks it looks very unique, but it just looks so natural. And I mean, like, you know, you see lots of people with the rosy boas and they have aspen in there, and then when you see something like what you have, it's just like a total difference. So can you tell people what you use and how you made it look the way it looks?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same substrate. I actually came up with the recipe for the substrate to do the scleropus one. It's exactly the same, and it's kind of 5 different components, really, which is stone dust, which comes from like ground, it's like sandstone. Some sort of up to sort of 2 or 3 mil chips of that same stuff, so dust and chips, and then it has 2 reptile substrates in it, which is not sure if they're available over there, but they're quite hard to find here as well. It's called Lucky Reptile Desert Bedding, and it's 2 different colours of that. It's the golden, and the natural is like kind of the brown, and then topsoil is as well. So it's a mixture of those 5 things. But the absolute key to get the texture of it as it is to mix it in a bucket really, really wet, almost like a sloppy cement, and then put it in and basically bake it in the enclosure. And that's what gives it that real crisp, dry top. But once it's completely dry, you kind of rub your fingers over it. That gives you that loose dusting on the top. But actually underneath, if something manages to burrow down underneath it, it's actually still relatively soft and perfectly burrowed. Now, they can dig through that top layer. Some of the scleropus have scraped away in the corner. They're not much of a diggers, but the rosy boa has in some corners. So it's diggable, but it's solid, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, is it looks like outside ground, like the way it's compacted, and it just has a very natural look to it, which you don't see a lot with, especially with arid substrates and arid setups. So quite often it just looks like sand or something, but it just looks like actual land, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I developed the substrate before I went to Arizona last year in September, and I was actually quite proud and chuffed of myself when I actually stepped out onto it for real. And I was like, yeah, this isn't actually too different. Obviously, it has got some differences. I'm never going to replicate it perfectly without bringing the soil back with me. But I was relatively chuffed with how it turned out. And then I think recently when I posted some of the Mexican rosy boa stuff in sort of some of the more sort of, should we say, specific groups for these types of species, people from that area were like, yeah, I would genuinely say, if you didn't see the enclosure around it, I would say that is the ground in Tucson, or that is the ground in somewhere in Arizona. And that was coming from locals who live there and have lived there all their life. So yeah, that kind of sunk it home that I'd got it right.
Yeah.
And I will stick to that recipe like glue for now.
And with your rosy boa, I know you made that post where there's some classic myths that go along with rosy boas that you hear all the time in the hobby that you pretty much crushed within the first 2 days of having this snake.
Pretty much the first night, yeah.
Yeah. So can you run through a few of those and what you saw from the animal that you have?
So probably one of the biggest myths is rosy boas don't climb. Well, I can almost guarantee you, give it another hour, and that branch that you can see there, she'll be hanging off.
Yeah.
So favourite branch to hang off about 10 o'clock at night. So any minute now she'll be up there, I reckon. Although she did feed yesterday, so she's probably going to hunker down for a day or two. But she's always climbing. I say she, I don't actually know what it is. As I say it. Daughter's named it Wendy, don't ask. So it does cruise about, and it does quite happily climb day, night, more often at night, sort of early morning, late at night after lights out. It's normally out and about, but it does come out and bask in the day as well, and climbs in the day, but not quite as much, which leads on to the other myth, which is they're nocturnal. No, they're not.
Yeah.
They're affected by bright lights. I mean, I've got 4 light units above that 1 meter tank. So I've got 120 watt halogen flood lamp fitting that you fit on the outside of your wall.
Yeah,
Outside your house, which you can just see that black box up there on the top.
Yeah, it's like almost like a floodlight you'd go to open on your garage or something.
It's exactly that. It's 120 watt halogen in that, and which is dimmable as well. So that's running on the thermostat. And then I've got obviously a T5 12% Arcadia tube in there, and then I've got 2 LED skylight fixtures as well. So I think there's probably pushing 8,000 or 10,000 lumens in that Viv, mainly because the Viv is quite short. It's only 45 centimeters tall. So it's bright in there. It's certainly a lot brighter than a tub or something that might just have a heat mat and no lights and stuff. So yeah, they're affected by light. Well, this one isn't anyway. But again, it all comes down to, if that's all they're used to and there's suddenly changed, then yeah, I think I'd be the same if I was stuck in a dark room for years and then all of a sudden thrust outside into the daylight. I think I'd be pretty freaked out as well.
Yeah, exactly. So is that the myth that they actually don't do well with lights?
So yeah, apparently they stress and don't eat.
Oh, interesting.
Is what I keep hearing regurgitated. Well, she's smashed every feed I've given her. I think a couple of days before we recorded this, I uploaded a video on YouTube on my channel, which was a full beginning to end strike and feed. That was done in the middle of the afternoon. I didn't put her where she was. I saw her sat there. I thought, I'll try and give her a feed, stuck the camera on top, dangled the fluff in front of her, and bang, straight away. No hesitation at all. So if she wasn't feeding for months on end, yeah, all right, I might believe it. But she's smashed every single feed I've offered her every 7 to 10 days. Yeah. So, yeah, she's still young. I keep saying she.
Wendy.
Wendy is still young, yeah. So, I think she was born, she hatched June, July this year. So she was still quite small. She's only probably about that. Yeah. Probably just under a foot.
So will she go in one of the big wooden Vivs that you eventually make?
Absolutely, yep.
Awesome.
Yep, she'll be going in a 1500 by 70 by 70. And it probably won't get more than it'll exceed a meter long.
Yeah, so she'll have tons of space.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. As well as height to climb.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So as far as that project goes, is starting the enclosures. When do you have a timeline on that, or is it just kind of when you get a time to do it?
I can neither confirm or deny any kind of timelines because I never stick to them.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I've got the wood to build the first 2. It's just a matter of time. And obviously the time of year as well is not helping with the lead up to Christmas and kids and stuff. So it will get done at some point. I'll probably build the first one in the Christmas break.
Cool.
And then have that set up with some of these lights from the new stuff in it. Well, I mean, I'm in no rush to move this. I mean, these ones behind me are 5 foot. So these are 5 by 2 by 2s. So the animals are perfectly happy in those. I'm in no rush to move them on from that. This will be the last unit to go. So these animals will stay in these until the last ones are built.
Right.
So the new ones will be for either testing lighting stuff or new animals.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I mean, you have many different projects on the go, so I can't wait to see how they all develop. Is there anything else you wanted to cover today before we wrapped up? It's hard to tell how long we've been talking for because we've been kind of, for the listeners wouldn't know, but we've been going on and off. So is there anything else that we haven't chatted about that you wanted to cover?
No, I think we're good. I think, unless I can't remember all the questions that you sent across, but I think we've covered all those.
Yeah. Well, Sam, thank you so much for spending the time with me and showing us all of this crazy, intricate gadgets that you're working on. Like I said, I can't wait to see how this is going to develop in the future. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to your future projects as well. And it was great to hear all the different stories. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Just keep an eye out on the Herp HQ page, because I think probably early next year I'll probably do a live Q&A or something on the YouTube channel or the Facebook page on this system when it's a bit more further along. Haven't decided whether I will or not do that yet, but
well, I'll put it in the show notes. That's the Herp HQ on YouTube as well as on Facebook, right?
It is, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dylan. Good to speak to you again.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Sam, thank you so much for joining me again and also walking through that whole process with us. I think I can speak for myself and all the listeners when I say that is an unbelievable piece of technology you've built. We're all super jealous that you have it, and we're going to continue watching it as you develop it. Now, I will say the crazy thing about this project that Sam's working on is it is just, as you could tell, it's a massive project and it's constantly working out, different problems and problem solving all these different things that arise. Now, I think the day after we recorded the podcast, Sam completely rewrote the way the lighting works in the code, the way the lights come on and the timing of the LED lights and the sort of the ramping on and off like he was showing us. He completely rewrote the code, so now it is even better. I think it was something like 2,000 lines of code that he had to rewrite, something crazy like that. He had sort of a brainwave, he rewrote a whole bunch of code, and now it even works better. I think he's able to run it off of 2 channels now. Now, again, I think we are going to try to do some sort of Q&A thing, and he's going to do that on his channel in January. So when he does that, I'm going to make sure that you guys know, and I might help him out with that as well. That way we can kind of bounce questions. So if you do have questions and want to see more of this project developing, make sure you go follow him at Herp HQ, and we'll watch for that Q&A session, hopefully in the new year. So listeners, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Hopefully that blew your mind and you're starting to see some of the potential, how little we have developed when you think about it in the reptile hobby. There's so much more we can do here. So that is so exciting. Thank you for listening. If you did enjoy it, make sure you share it on Facebook and Instagram. Tag me so I can come thank you. If you are looking for an Animals at Home t-shirt, you can head to animalsathome.ca/shop. And thank you very much to CustomReptileHabitats.com for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. If you're looking for any reptile-related equipment, make sure you head to the links in the show notes or the description. Only a few more episodes left in 2020. It's been a crazy year. I will catch you guys on the next episode.